This is For Keeps, a podcast about collections and connections. I'm David Peterkowski. This is a collector's story that brings together brushes with greatness, strokes of a pen, and the intense personal satisfaction that comes to any collector who works hard to acquire something that nobody else has, especially when they go to some incredible lengths to make it all happen. The collector in question is a very driven man named Bryan Ulrich. Bryan, who's in his late 40s and lives in Toronto, has spent more than 3 decades chasing down well-known public figures and asking them for their autographs, everyone from athletes to A-list film and music stars. But he hasn't been thrusting scraps of paper at the stars he's tracked down. He's been much more thoughtful about what he's had signed by celebrities. Promotional photos and movie posters signed by film stars, and record album sleeves, photos, and even musical instruments signed by some, more like practically all, of the most legendary names in popular music. Among the tens of thousands of autographs that Bryan's acquired over the years, all in person, mind you, are Tom Hanks, Clint Eastwood, Daniel Craig, Eddie Murphy, Jennifer Lopez, Leonardo DiCaprio, Sophia Loren, and many more. His music autograph collection includes Adele, Aretha Franklin, the Rolling Stones, the Supremes, Willie Nelson, Michael Jackson, and Bruce Springsteen, among countless others. And what sets Bryan apart from other collectors is what he's able to get signed. He's got an impressive collection of guitars signed by some of rock music's greatest names. He's got albums signed by not one, but all of the members of classic rock bands like Genesis, Pink Floyd, the Eagles, and many more. And, along the way, he's also collected quite a few stories about all the effort and planning that's gone into getting these autographs. More on that later. Bryan displays much of his collection at his home. But, for a price, you too can have some of his autographed and authenticated items, which he sells through a business he runs called the Signature Library. For $5,000 US, someone recently bought an autographed copy of Michael Jackson's landmark Thriller album, and a poster for The Godfather Part 2, signed by 5 of its stars, as well as director Francis Ford Coppola, recently went for $7,500. Still available? An Epiphone double-neck electric guitar, signed by the 3 surviving members of Led Zeppelin, for a mere $35,000. It's big business for Bryan, but one that he says grew out of his undying passion for autographs and the thrill of the chase that comes with acquiring and completing signed items. That passion began at an early age, when a teenage Bryan first dove into the world of autograph collecting through his love of sports.
I started by meeting baseball players when I was around 12, and I had a very good experience, and no one was doing it, meaning it was not popularized at all. It was so unique and novel. I mean, I was a 12-year-old kid meeting my heroes alone. Like, no one else was there at their hotels and waiting in the lobby, and they would treat me really well, and I felt special, and I would come home with these trophies, or whether they were baseball signed or a pennant signed by the whole team or photos, whatever it was, and I'd put these trophies up in my room, and I'd start a collection, and it became a thing, and it became something for me to do that was productive, and I always knew that there was some value behind everything, so I never felt like it was a waste of my time, like I was just going and doing something frivolously with my time. I really enjoyed it. It did become my obsession. Like in high school, instead of maybe going down some other path, the autograph stuff kind of kept me on the straight and narrow, if you will, because I was like really busy with that and I was committed to it.
When Bryan got to high school, his interests expanded beyond sports, and so did the kinds of autographs he sought out.
I was able to shift my abilities and skill set to things that I was into, like going to concerts and meeting the rock stars and musicians. And living in Toronto, there was a big film festival. There still is, the Toronto Film Festival. And back then it was not as big as it was. So to meet a celebrity was very accessible back then, and really, really great, because you were not surrounded by other fans or screaming people behind barricades. It was a very intimate experience.
The Toronto International Film Fest is one of the largest publicly attended film festivals in the world, and it draws a lot of big names. Among those big names is Robert De Niro, who came to town in 1993 to promote his film A Bronx Tale. De Niro is famously publicity shy. Not that Bryan knew that at the time.
I had no idea what he was like. I just was really obsessed with the film Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, and I just figured out how to find him for when he was here for the film festival, and I did, and I actually followed him from his premiere to a restaurant and waited for him. I let him go into the restaurant. I didn't want him to know that I had followed him, and kind of even had that sense then that that was the wrong thing to do. I mean, that was the right thing to do. The wrong thing would be to approach him getting out of the car. So that night, by being patient, it did help. Robert De Niro was a very difficult person to meet and difficult autograph to get, and someone who now we know was not so personable, doesn't like to do interviews or meet fans and stuff like that. But I had no idea. And I approached him when he came out of the restaurant, and he was super nice to me and took his time and listened to me, and the experience completely exceeded my expectations. And I was on cloud nine, and I was totally starstruck and wanted to have that feeling and that experience again, and that rush of adrenaline. And it is like a drug. And so then I kept on doing it.
This is kind of a big picture question, but can you put into words what it is about collecting autographs that excited you back then and continues to? What's the attraction?
You know, I think about this a lot, and because I'm a hunter and I enjoy, for me, it's like twofold. So I really enjoy the challenge, the journey from deciding on what item it is, the piece, and then going after and trying to fulfill that vision that I have. And there's the challenge in it. And then when you get the autograph, the way I approach it is like quality over quantity. So I'm all about getting the most beautiful, aesthetically pleasing signature I can get on the perfect item, which thus would create, in my opinion, my mind, hopefully the most valuable item of that person to get signed. When I get that autograph, it's the culmination. It's like, I don't want to compare myself to a football player, but like it is somewhat like the journey of trying to get the Super Bowl, or any athlete trying to get that championship. That is my championship. That's my trophy. For me, it's totally different than most collectors, because I'm one of the rare people who is the in-person collector. The majority of people who collect autographs are people who just buy them. I've often wondered, what is it about the autographs that appeal to those people? Because for me, if I wasn't able to get them, I don't know if I would be so into it. The fact that I got that and I kind of created that art is what excites me, because I tell them where to sign it, how to sign it, and I'm the one choosing the item and choosing the pen. And I'm also trying to get myself into the best setting possible to create what I want to create, to have that comfort and that ability to basically direct the artist into doing what I want them to do. It's not all controlled by me, because there's like, the autograph is them. That's their creative mark or their creative stamp on their item, their piece. That's how I look at it.
Uh-huh. So generally speaking, how have you gone about getting your autographs? It sounds like you do a lot of planning. It sounds like you're putting some thought into what to have the person sign. I mean, are you waiting for celebrities to come to Toronto, or are you flying around the world?
I will travel, and I go to events, and I go all over the world. Recently, I traveled to England to meet Genesis, to have a lot of items that were missing a few members, to have them signed and completed. And yeah, I'll go wherever. I will carefully select the right place where I know I can be alone with the artists. And I will get people in Toronto, but I often travel. And I used to live in Los Angeles, so I've accumulated also a really enormous inventory. And there's still a lot of things in my inventory that are what I call puzzles, and there's still pieces that need to be added to finish those puzzles. Like every band, you really need to get every living member. It doesn't reach its value until you've obtained all those people. And the same goes for Hollywood stuff. If it's a movie poster, you have to get the people that are featured on the poster or the cast. And so I'm always working on these pieces, puzzles, if you will.
Turning his autograph collecting into a business was not always part of the plan, but Bryan's prolific passion and lack of space seemed to have pushed the issue around 2010, and the Signature Library was born.
I do put some stuff up, but not that much, and I would need, a house the size of Wayne Manor to really, properly display all my stuff. It's enough to fill, a massive museum. So I just decided I would start selling some stuff off, and also with my abilities to replenish and get more, and I enjoy it. So it just kind of happened because I was not happy with my career choices and things that were working out, and so I chose to just kind of continue doing this stuff. And I was doing it at a high level when I lived in Los Angeles, and it was the right time. I was very lucky to be doing this in the 90s and the early 2000s before it became popularized and became a really big commercial industry, which autographs are now. Everyone's aware of the value. The artists are aware, and it's very difficult to get people's signatures now. As a lot of people will say, the game has changed.
What hasn't changed is Bryan's insistence that the people whose autographs he gets are people for whom he has a great deal of admiration, regardless of who's hot and potentially more marketable in the moment.
I was really driven by my adoration for a lot of these people and reverence for them. I never bothered, and I still haven't, getting autographs of people that I don't respect. I've never asked someone, like a lot of pop names or people that would just sell that I think are fleeting, like the Justin Biebers or those kind of people. They're not artists that I care about, so I don't have the passion or the desire to go and try to get their autographs.
So let's dive a bit deeper into your collection. What would you say are some of the more impressive ones you've gotten?
The most impressive one, I think, for me, and I think a lot of other people who do in-person collecting would agree, is definitely was Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan is the holy grail of autograph collecting. He's always been an extremely difficult person to get a signature from, or get anything from. It happened once, actually not too long ago, and I had tried for him when I was a little kid. This is a funny little story. I was alone, and he had walked down the Four Seasons property to his bus, which was parked on the street in Toronto, and he had a towel on his head, and I had one album, and I asked him nicely if he would sign the album, and he just said sure, and took the pen, and he turned the pen upside down and signed it with the cap side, like a ghost signing, and then said, "Here you go." And I said, "Mr. Dillon, you turned the pen upside down. You didn't really sign it." He said, "Yeah, I signed it. It's there." And then he took the pen and he threw it behind his head, about 30 feet behind his head, and just dropped the album on the ground and continued walking to the bus.
Wow.
And I never tried again after that time because I was young and I was still learning, and I didn't know that he was impossible and he doesn't ever sign. And I got very lucky when I did get him. It was a fortunate situation, and again, it was in the right setting, and that is what afforded me the opportunity and to get it.
And when you got it, how did you get it, and what did you get signed?
I was in a party, a Grammy party, and it was in the Beverly Hills Hotel, and I was just talking to a friend, and he calmly told me that Robert Zimmerman was sitting behind me. I had a acoustic pickguard in my pocket, actually, in case someone was in the party for that exact reason. And always got to be a little prepared. And I turned around and kneeled down. He was with a girl, and his security guard was next to her. And I asked him, and he was receptive to signing, and he asked if I had a pen, and I did. And he signed it beautifully and handed it back. And then I turned around, and within 10 seconds, he had left the party, and that was it. That's how much he dislikes being bothered, and because of that, he had left, I think. So I ruined his night. But I got a beautiful guitar from Bob Dylan. So, yeah, that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
And you got your pen back.
I did, yeah. This time he didn't throw it.
Beyond Bob Dylan, Bryan cherishes the items he's had signed by other music icons, some of whom no longer sign anything.
Neil Young is a huge artist of mine that I love, and I have one of his Gretsch guitars where he wrote in his hand, like his famous hand printing that he will like write his lyrics on the lyric sheets from, and he wrote Heart of Gold in a gold pen and signed his name with like a full name signature, which is pretty rare from Neil. I think I'm also just proud that I've hung on to a lot of the vintage stuff that I got in the 90s that you just cannot get anymore, from Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page, he's actually harder than Bob Dylan because he, like Ringo Starr, he kind of announced that he just will not sign autographs at all anymore under no circumstances. They're just done signing. And so having those names and having a good inventory of those names, the Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney, again, these are all people who do not sign autographs at all anymore. To get Mick Jagger or any of those names nowadays is really next to impossible. Other names that I love, like David Bowie, the real giants of rock and roll, and then even of Hollywood, from Paul Newman to, all the greats. So Jack Nicholson, you don't see him out at much anymore. And all the legendary older names, Elizabeth Taylor, that Hollywood golden age of the movie star is kind of gone now. So having all that stuff I'm very fortunate to have all that, and I hung on to it.
A somewhat more contemporary artist he's especially proud to have the signatures of is the French pop duo Daft Punk, who, before they broke up, were known for catchy songs like the 2013 mega hit Get Lucky, but also for the robot helmets, outfits, and gloves they wore for public appearances to preserve their identities. What makes Bryan so proud of the items he got them to sign?
Very valuable, but also the challenge of getting them. They're one of the I'd say one of the most challenging autographs to get in the world. And because of their persona of being, disguised with the masks and not revealing their true faces and identities. They're very reclusive artists as well. They don't tour, and now they've broken up. So how I got them and the stuff that I got from them in 2017, might have been 2015, that was a huge acquisition for me. And very proud of that one as well.
What did they sign?
I have a guitar signed where they wrote the lyrics, "We're up all night to get lucky." And it's like a very beautiful gold disco kind of guitar. And I have a lot of beautiful posters, and I would have them signed because their helmets were one's silver, one's gold. So I would switch the pen. One would sign in the silver and the other one in the gold, and a lot of vinyl albums. And they just don't exist. Like the only ones that exist really in the world are mine. So that's like the last great thing that I'm very fond of that I did.
And then there's Bryan's connection with Michael Jackson, which netted Bryan quite a few signed items, including a red leather jacket similar to the one Jackson wore in the video for his song Beat It, as well as some pretty wild stories about being in the orbit of the King of Pop.
The first time I met Michael, though, that was like a one-off incident in New York, in Harlem, where I actually hid in Al Sharpton's office closet to get to Michael because it was so difficult to get to back then. And it worked, and it was crazy, but it worked out, and Michael was incredibly nice, and met him, got a picture, and got some things signed. But in 2008, I was living in Los Angeles, and I was friendly with some paparazzi, and one of them was very close with Michael Jackson's people, and he had learned that Michael was going to be moving from Vegas back to Los Angeles, and it was in early fall of 2008, and he was staying in Bel Air, California at a hotel, and myself and that paparazzi were there, and I started meeting Michael then, and he got to know me, and his security people got to know me, and he loved having his fans waiting around for him. He loved his fans literally following him around. That's what he was used to, and I think he felt uncomfortable if that wasn't happening.
Helping Bryan stand out from the crowd was his day job at the time, working for another soul music legend from the 60s and 70s.
At the time, I also started working with Sly Stone, Sly and the Family Stone, and I had become his personal assistant. And when I did get close enough to speak with Michael and his security team, I mentioned to them how I was working with Sly, and They really were kind of overwhelmed by that. Michael loved that, and they would, make sure my stuff got signed, and they even eventually would call me and let me know, because I would spend so much time waiting outside of his house for him to go out. And that's when we would get his autograph. When he went out, we would follow him around, and his window would roll down and he would take the stuff into the car and he would sign it while he would drive and then hand it back out, or he would just sign it in front of us when he got there, and we would go into the stores with him and spend basically the days driving around until he went back home. And that was a routine schedule almost for 5-6 days a week from, I'd say, October of 2008 until about a month before he passed away. Obviously, he passed away on June 25th. And I think the last time I saw him was the end of May of that year.
Whereas some celebrities resent the fact that the autographs they've given out can be sold for significant profit by people like Bryan, Michael Jackson seems to have viewed it as a cost of doing business.
He knew we were selling autographs, but he knew we were also fans and collectors, and he didn't care. A funny side story is, at the time I was dating a girl who was best friends with Katy Perry, and Katy Perry would come over to my apartment in Los Angeles. And one time I came home and my girlfriend and Katy were in my apartment, and I had come home with, I think, 22 signed Thriller albums. And she was so baffled. Why did Michael sign so many albums, and why do you have him sign so many Thrillers? And I explained to her, well, because Thriller is the greatest album of all time, and because he doesn't care and he likes it. And she just couldn't understand that concept. And I explained to her, I said, well, it's because you think everything is about money. He doesn't care what people do. He doesn't think about others. He's completely altruistic. He loves to make people happy. And so I think a lot of the old school people, they came by it hard. They knew how big a deal it was to get to be a star. And I think today a lot of people don't realize that. And that's another reason why I don't, quote unquote, chase the younger and newer stars, because they're actually a pain in the ass.
I'm also wondering if Michael saw the autograph generosity as a way of keeping his name out there too.
I'm sure he did. And I think it was all part of that feeling that he got, like he was still the megastar that he was.
And I have to ask, how did you get into Al Sharpton's closet?
I knew that Michael was going to appear there for a big press conference. And so I decided to go there very early and sneak in. And I slid in kind of with the press when they were going in. As soon as I went in, I kind of just cased the building. It was small. It was like upstairs on the second floor. And there was the one main room where there was the dais and he was going to speak and the press was there. And I knew like that wasn't good enough because there was a table in between me and him and I wouldn't be able to get to him there. So I looked for the place. So I said, well, he's not going to just come in and go to the dais, so that he's got to go somewhere first. So I kind of like backtracked from the dais and looked where the room was, and that was his office. And I said, this is where he's going to be. So I had to get in that room, but I had to hide somewhere. So there was just one closet, and it was a coat closet. I hid in there and shut the closet doors and waited until I heard some voices. And when I heard the voices, I looked through the crack and I heard Michael talk. I just very slowly, delicately opened those doors. And I mean, I was accosted right away, but Michael is so sweet. He was so sweet and calm. He right away just like completely calmed the situation and made it totally fine. And it was very smooth, actually. It worked out really well.
Like a smooth criminal.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, all work and no play would make Bryan a dull boy, if not for the fact that, even in his off hours, he's had even more celebrity encounters. Can you tell the story of roller skating with Brad Pitt?
Sure. A girlfriend of mine, actually, who had come out from Toronto for Oscar week. There's a lot of parties I would go to. She liked doing that stuff and also was kind of good at it with me. She was kind of sneaky too. And it was a paparazzi that had called me and told me that John C. Reilly was having his birthday party at a roller rink in Glendale. And he told me that Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston were going to be there, and a bunch of other celebrities. And so we went there, and it was easy to get in. It was basically a secret word kind of password. And we overheard the password and slid in. And strapped on the roller skates, and she obviously wanted to talk to Brad Pitt, and he was roller skating, and Jen wasn't. And I figured the introduction was that I'm Canadian and we're the hockey guys, so I challenged Brad to a race in roller skates. And actually, he beat me. We took some pictures. Yeah, it was a fun night. There was a lot of other people there.
And I'm sure you let him win the race.
Kind of. And again, that's can't always do the autographs. That would be obviously very inappropriate and very telling, obviously, if you were to ask for an autograph in a party like that.
Though that scenario may not have lent itself to an autograph opportunity, apparently, Toronto traffic is another story. At least that was the case when Bryan nabbed a hard-to-get signature from the drummer of the Rolling Stones. Can you tell the story of how you got Charlie Watts to sign a guitar for you?
Oh, well, actually, that was that girl, that same girl. Charlie, he really disliked signing guitars. He would tell you, I don't play guitar. And he would say it in that dry voice and just dry wit, like, I don't play guitar. And you would just be left helpless and with no comeback. So, like as I said, these are puzzles, and Charlie's a big piece of the band, and I needed him to sign that guitar. So they were here rehearsing in 2002, amongst many other times they came to Toronto to rehearse for their tours. And I had learned that the band rented separate houses, sort of not the suburbs, but a little bit midtown. And I learned the route that they were taking to the rehearsal space. So I enlisted my friend, who's very pretty, and I told her that she needed to wear a bikini that day because it was going to take a bikini to stop Charlie Watts in traffic. So there she was. I sent her out. It was a timing thing, and I saw the van coming, and I sent her out that they were stopped in traffic. And she just held her guitar up in the air, and those van doors swung open. And next thing I knew, she was in the van with Charlie, and the guitar was being signed. It was definitely a showstopper, a traffic stopper. It was pretty funny.
And very effective.
Absolutely.
So when you've gotten all the members of a band to sign the same item, is that something you're doing for your own satisfaction as a collector, or is it just good for business, a little bit of both?
It's both. But it's mostly for me. It's a great feeling, that sense of completion. I think that the money is behind it, knowing that, yeah, there's that added value, but it's that feeling of like, this is the goal.
So what would you say it is about your personality in particular that's made you so successful in this venture? Is there something inside you that makes you a better or more effective autograph hunter?
I think that I'm adaptable and that I'm also knowledgeable about the stuff that I am interested in, that I go after. I'm well versed in music and film. I consider myself, very knowledgeable in both. And also having the right look is helpful. I think if I was too tall or too short or too big, I would maybe stand out. And I think that I don't stand out, and that's helped me. And I think that just coming from the background that I come from and having experience of working in film and in music and knowing the boundaries and knowing how to approach the celebrities, because I've spent time on the other side, so to speak, with them, that psychology has really, really helped me. It gives me a bit of an edge. I am pretty fearless to get the stuff that I get. And that's the thing, is I can tell these stories, and I could, even though I'm not going to tell you how I cook my sausage, people want to know, how does he do it? How do you do that stuff? But even if I did reveal how I do it, 10 out of 10 people wouldn't be able to do it, because there's a feeling inside that most people can't get over. There's that fear factor of I shouldn't really be doing this. Am I stepping over the bounds here? And also, most people don't want to bother people, and they're shy, or they don't have that nerve. I think if you stop 10 people on the street and ask them, if you saw your favorite celebrity standing outside of a restaurant where you were standing, would you go over and talk to them? I think 5 would say yes and 5 would say no. I enjoy that uncomfortable anxiety. Most people hate that feeling. I like it.
The addicting adrenaline rush that comes with Bryan's work led him to pursue autographs by the recently reformed band Genesis. Bryan got a guitar and several albums signed, and while he wouldn't share everything about his methods, some extra effort was needed to get to the band's most famous member.
I needed Phil Collins to finish these items, and Phil is very difficult to access now, especially on tour. He's in a wheelchair. He uses an underground garage, and you don't see him. But I wasn't going to let that stop me, and I needed to get him to sign these items, and I did. And I did something that was definitely going way above and way out of bounds, and was an uncomfortable, high anxiety situation. But I enjoyed it because I knew that I was going to get it.
Did this involve a bellhop uniform and delivering room service?
No. Didn't go that deep. No.
But you can't tell me what you did.
Well, I don't want to say exactly what I did, but it wasn't anything illegal, or, it was just being kind of like very fearless and sneaky.
Uh-huh.
And timing. It took me, a couple times to investigate and plan this. They were here for a few nights, and I had to take a couple times to go and figure it all out. And so that also makes it that much more meaningful, is I've put in work, I've put in time, and I have a plan, and I want to execute it. And so being in that moment of like the time to execute, that's the most exciting part for me. And then hopefully he says yes. So that's the difference between an autograph seeker and a paparazzi, is the paparazzi doesn't need permission, whereas the autograph seeker needs the permission and approval from the celebrity.
Apparently, an autograph seeker's work is never done, and Bryan still has a few more items in progress that he'd love to get finished.
I'm trying to finish a second Hotel California album signed flawlessly by everyone, and I already have Glenn, who passed away a couple years ago now. So the only person I'm missing is Don Henley, who is, again, another one of these guys who is just a near impossible signature. But I've gotten him many times, and I know I can get him again. And so it's just about seeing him and having the opportunity. It's one of the more valuable, iconic albums to have. Let's see. Yeah, there's just some other things I'm trying to finish, I guess, like a guitar that's very special that has half of the band of Rage Against the Machine with some really incredible lyrics and stuff written on the guitar. It's a really unique piece, and a band that I grew up liking a lot, so I'm excited to finish that. And there's no one really left that I haven't met that excites me, which used to be kind of like a really fun part about this, was meeting people that I haven't met yet and getting things signed that I've never gotten signed. And I am kind of an old soul, and I love the 70s for music and film, so I try to collect like a lot of 70s posters, film posters, original posters, and have a lot of those stars sign those. And my guitar collection is probably the most impressive in-person signed guitar collection in the world. That, again, is a very big challenge, especially in this day and age, to have artists sign the guitars. They really only do that for charity. It's very rare. So it's a really big challenge. And there's still artists I'd like to get.
So talk to me about the signature library and your revamped website. How's your business evolving at this point?
Well, I took down my site for about a year and worked on a modernized, Shopify platform. The items are highly curated, and we're going to be dropping like fresh items every month. So it's going to be just an ongoing, revolving door of incredible, unique, one-of-a-kind autographed items. And they're all really great investments. I mean, anyone that's gotten any of my pieces, they've all gone up in value quite a bit, and it's irreplaceable. I don't get that exact item done again. It's never going to be the same. So, I'm getting new items, but the difference is I'm not an autograph dealer. I'm an autograph collector who is selling his collection. I'm not selling my whole collection, but I am allowing you to peruse and choose items that I've put out there for you to buy. So that's a very rare thing in this industry, and I think it's reflected in the items. You see it. If you go to eBay, you don't see stuff that you'll see on my site.
With the growth in the autograph industry, the need for third-party authentication of signed items is stronger than ever, and Bryan's got that covered.
There's basically 3 companies that authenticate all your items if they're, they go through a process. And nowadays, to sell an item and for a buyer to buy an item, they only feel comfortable with that third-party certificate. You can look up the source and everything online, and it does really protect the item and protect the investment and adds the value. And I was apprehensive for many years about doing it because it wasn't consistent. Once it became like a standard in the industry and it's consistent, that's when I joined the party and I said, okay, I've got to spend the money, even though my name is impeccable out there. And anyone who knows me will attest to how intense and how determined and committed I am to getting the signatures in person. And the last thing I would ever do is fake or whatever, forge an autograph. That would undermine my entire life and existence, really. So, I mean, like I said, it was never for a career. It was just a hobby that became a huge part of my identity and my life.
Uh-huh. So one last question for you. Is this something you can see yourself doing for another 20 or 30 years, or is autograph collecting, at least as you do it, something that's best left to younger collectors because of all the effort?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something best left to younger people. I can't imagine myself just completely not doing it, even though I've taken years off. I mean, when I worked in film, I did not ask for autographs ever. I was surrounded by super talent, A-list talent, and I knew my boundaries and I knew the protocol, and I respected that, and I never jeopardized that. But now the difference is also when you get older, it's like, oh, you're 50 years old and you're asking for an autograph. There's that too. So that makes it a little harder to do in certain situations. But for me, it's more about completing these items. I don't think I would probably be doing it after 10 years. I'm hoping that in the next few years I can finish up the stuff that I'm trying to finish up. And if not, I'll just let go of it, I would imagine, and probably be done with it. But I will do selective hits where I might travel, or someone says, here, I need this really badly. I'll pay you like an exorbitant amount of money to go do this. I happen to need that person too, and I'm going to that place anyways. Okay, then maybe I'll do that. But that's like a rare example.
I like that, kind of like an autograph hitman. I could hire you to go get somebody's autograph.
I've done that, and I do that.
Well, Bryan, that's everything I've got for you. I want to thank you so much for chatting about your many autograph adventures and how things are taking shape with your business, the Signature Library. And I'm just glad I didn't have to send over a woman in a bikini to get you to agree to an interview.
It wouldn't hurt, though. You could have done it.
Part 2.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, David. It's really nice talking to you.
Yeah, this has been fun. Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye-bye. So, let there be no doubt, Bryan Ulrich's carefully curated collection of autographed items is almost as impressive as the work that goes into getting them all done. And it's good to know that if you really want something signed by a celebrity and haven't got a clue as to how to make it happen, you could have Bryan bravely make it happen on your behalf. After all, bravery is Bryan's signature move. For Keeps is a production of me, David Peterkowski. My thanks to Bryan Ulrich for sharing the story behind his incredible collection of autographs and his work creating the Signature Library. At forkeepspodcast.com, you'll find photos of some of his signed items, as well as a link to the Signature Library's website. The show's theme song is by Still Flyin, and the closing theme is by Eric Frisch. Additional music by Chad Crouch. Visit the show online at forkeepspodcast.com. or follow For Keeps on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at For Keeps Podcast. And if you're a fan of the show, hit the subscribe button or post a positive review for it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to For Keeps. Until next time, keep on keeping on.